All right, everyone, we're back to Shurley. This is our lesson for today, for Monday, and it's a lesson on quotations. So I need you to get your folder out with your reference. Please, we're going to be on reference 46 today, talking about the rules of quotation marks. So go on and get there, reference 46, page 119, and while you do, I'm going to read to you two stories, okay? I'm going to read to you a short story. It's the same story, but it's written in two different ways. And when I'm finished, I want you to tell me if you enjoyed story 1 or story 2 the best. So story time with Mrs. Brown. Here we go. Story 1. Ben couldn't figure out where he had hit the ball. It had gone into a little clump of trees, and he had looked and looked for it. He called his brother Aaron and asked if he had found the ball, but Aaron had not. The boys finally gave up and went home. A month later, Aaron came running into the house, calling for Ben to come outside. Aaron had been climbing up the clump of trees where Ben had hit the ball. He showed Ben that his ball had landed in the fork of a tree, and a bird had built her nest on top of it. That was story 1. Listen to story 2. I can't figure out where I hit that ball, Ben complained. I know the ball went into this little clump of trees, he muttered as he continued looking for it. Finally, in frustration, he yelled to his brother, Hey, Aaron, have you found it yet? No, replied Aaron, it's nowhere. I've searched every square inch a dozen times. It has just disappeared. Well, I guess we'll just go home, muttered Ben, shaking his head as he eyed the grove of trees one last time. A month later, Aaron came running into the house yelling, Ben, come outside. I've got to show you something. Aaron took Ben to the clump of trees where Ben had hit the ball earlier. Aaron said, I was climbing this tree and I found your ball. Well, I'll be, Ben said as he stared at his ball. There it was, caught in the fork of the tree. But that wasn't all. A bird had built a nest on top of it. Did you enjoy hearing story 1 or story 2 the best? In story 2, we used quotation marks. We quoted people their exact words. And to me, that made the story much more interesting. When we use quotation marks, we are making our writing come alive. And we make our readers believe that they're right in the middle of all the action. Quotation build pictures for your readers as the story unfolds. And in story 2, the action is direct and strong. In story 1, the action is more indirect and maybe even considered a little weak, even though the wording of the two stories is very similar, except for the quotations. We will use quotations more if we understand how to write them correctly. Quotations are really fun to use, and it only requires a little effort once you learn all the basic rules about quotations. Quotations are used with words spoken by someone, exact words that are said. No paraphrases here, the exact words spoken. The words set off by quotation marks are usually called a direct quote. In your writing, you will often find it necessary to tell what someone said, and you will need to know several rules of punctuation in order to write quotations correctly. We're going to start by looking at reference 45 in your folder on page 119. It's the reference section in your book, so go ahead and get there as we go through each rule on how to punctuate quotation marks. Hopefully you've got it now. We're going to be looking at the rules today, and they can be a little bit confusing at first, but as we walk through them, you are going to understand how to use quotations correctly, and you'll use them the rest of your life. So take heed. Number 1, there's a pattern we go by. If you look at the pattern in reference 45, you will notice there are quotation marks with a capital C, then the word quote, then some punctuation marks and some ending quotation marks, explanatory words, and a period. We're about to discuss what all of that means. Number 2 says, Underline in explanatory words and use a period at the end. Number 3, you should have a beginning quote. Use quotation marks at the beginning and end of what is being said, and then put a comma, question mark, or exclamation mark after the quote, but not a period. And it should always be in front of the quotation mark. Number 4 is we capitalize the beginning of the quote and any proper nouns or the pronoun I. And number 5, punctuate the rest of the sentence by checking for apostrophes, periods, or commas that may be needed within the sentence. All right, you will never have trouble punctuating beginning quotations if you follow just a few simple quotation rules, because they tell you exactly what to do for the whole sentence. Look at the sentence under the guided practice in your reference and read that sentence with me. Here we go. The girls and I are going shopping on Monday with H.L. Davis, my mom said. Wow. We will have to break this up into sections and punctuate each section. So first, you always write a pattern to follow. So if we refer back to number 1 in your rules, we see the pattern. Let's read what the pattern says. Quote, see, quotation marks, see, quote, in mark, quotation marks, explanatory words, period. Now, I'm going to translate what that pattern means for you. Quotation marks begin our quote, and then we use a capital letter to start the quote. Now, we write the quote itself, the exact words spoken by someone. Next, we end our quote with a punctuation mark. We have 3 choices: a comma, an exclamation mark, or a question mark, but never a period. Next, we do our closing quote marks, followed by explanatory words and a period. And you're going to all understand this better as I explain the parts to you. Have you ever seen someone do quotation marks when they talk? Well, now that you're learning the rules for quotation marks, you're going to know if they're using those air quotation marks correctly. Now, look at number 2 in your reference box. Rule 2 says to underline in explanatory words and use a period at the end. Explanatory words are those words that explain who is doing the talking. They're not part of the actual quote. Anytime you have a beginning quote, your explanatory words will be at the end. What are the explanatory words at the end of this sentence? My mom said. So they want us to underline my mom said and then end it with a period. Now, let's look at Rule 3. Rule 3 says for the beginning quotes to use quotation marks at the beginning and the end of what is being said. Which words need quotation marks at the end and the beginning? Well, let's look at the sentence. Start them at the beginning, quotation. The girls and I are going shopping on Monday with H.C. Davis. End quote. Put quotation marks around these words because in Rule 3 it says to put quotation marks around the exact words being said. Now, in front of the ending quotes, we need to put a punctuation mark. We have 3 options, remember? The comma, exclamatory point, or the question mark, not the period. Which punctuation mark should we put in front of our closing quotation marks? It's not a question, and it's not a sentence with strong feeling. So let's put a comma in front of the closing quotes. A comma after the word Davis and in front of the quotation marks. Now let's look at Rule 4. Stay with me, we're almost there. Rule 4 says to capitalize the beginning of the quote and any proper nouns or the pronoun I. So which word should be capitalized in this sentence? The first word, the. I see the pronoun I. I see a day of the week, Monday. And there's an abbreviation, H, L, and a name, Davis. Yes, all these words need to be capitalized. We're not going to capitalize mom because in this sentence, it has a possessive pronoun in front of it, my mom. Because of that little word my, we do not capitalize the word mom in this sentence. All right, last rule. Rule 5 says to punctuate the rest of the sentence by checking for any apostrophes, periods, or commas that need to be added within the sentence. What punctuation is needed in this sentence? The abbreviations. We know after H and L, we need periods because it's someone's abbreviated name. Now, we have corrected the entire sentence. It wasn't that hard, was it? For a final check, you can go through the corrected sentence and use the quotation pattern only. Remember, the pattern is quotation marks, capital, quote, punctuation mark, end quotes, explanatory words, and